interesting thought. Have we answered? Do you remember that first day we said, what are the questions we need to answer? I don't know if you can remember what any of those were by now, or if you're too kind of fines washed, fresh air dug and test pitted and filled to remember. Remember what those original questions were? Does anybody remember any one of them?
The extent of the site.
The extent. Where are we going to get the answer to that from, do you think, the extent question? Geophys. Great. So John's geophys, those two big geophys surveys John's been doing, that's going to give us the extent. What was the other question you had?
The depth of the rooms.
And, sorry, and?
Depth.
Yes, or a date of the material that we're finding. And you've begun to see that with the work Paul's done and Danny, that we're looking at a Roman site. In terms of period, what's the spread, Paul, of material?
It seems to go from more or less the beginning of the Roman period to more or less the end of the Roman period. It goes right through. And we've also got some Iron Age pottery. We had a few bits of late Iron Age, but literally in the last 10 minutes, a piece of proper handmade Iron Age pottery's turned up as well. So it sounds like there's a phase of prehistoric occupation before the villa was built as well, which is good to know. And we're getting bits of struck flint kicking around as well. So there was other prehistoric activity going on there too.
Another thing that Paul and I were talking about just now was that the stuff that we've got coming out of the actual trenches seems to be much more domestic, more pottery and whatnot, whereas the stuff that we picked up in the other field, doing the field walking, it's much more CBM, ceramic building material, tiles, box glue and whatnot, and that's not represented half as much as it is in the field walking. Yeah, so that's quite interesting.
So it looks like the area of the test pits is probably the area around the buildings rather than the buildings themselves. And the field walking is smack on top of the building, it would seem. But the all singing, all dancing geophysics will hopefully tell us this in the near future.
Okay, guys, so depth, extent, identity, those are those things. What we've done with the 3 test bits that you've dug is characterise the surface deposit. And with Trench 4, what was the goal of Trench 4? What was Trench 4 about as opposed to the 3 test pits?
Looking for occupation layer?
Find the ditch.
Yes, I would. I mean, the Americans call it ground truthing the geophys. Do you remember we had a big double ditch feature? Could be robbed out, could be pipelines, could be anything.
Ground truthing.
Yeah, no, it's a big one. What does that mean? But yeah, no, I agree. We haven't got an English version, mind you.
Testing, confirming,
Well, anyway.
corroborating.
Ground truthing has got some sort of visceral pull to it that I quite like. But anyway, what we've done is we've dug a trench to see if John's geophys, what it is. And the goal was to drop it down and see if we could see the feature, but not dig the feature itself. And we've done pretty much that. Cassie's not here at the moment because she's recording. But who looked at Trench 4? Roger, you had a look at it. What was your overview of what we've done with that trench as opposed to the shallow ones?
Well, there was modern plough soil, and there was what was thought to be medieval plough soil, and then it was coming down onto what looked like a brown subsoil, but then possibly cutting into that, there was a much ashier, darker soil, which may have been the ditch that you were hoping to find.
And cutting across Trench 4, because I had a look at it just before I came to lunch, there is a very clear line, so we think we've got the edge of the dish. Why is that very useful from Time Team's point of view when we come here, hopefully next year? What does that tell us, that trench?
It verifies the geophys.
Verifies the geophys, also tell us how deep we've got to go down. The interesting thing, I think, Paul and I were talking about this, I used, we had the diggers having a go at that layer of subsoil below modern soil, and it's hard as rock. I couldn't, we couldn't even get a little mini digger through it. And what that says is that I think underneath that, there's a very good chance there's a Roman layer which hasn't been damaged by modern ploughing. Because I think it would take some degree of modern ploughing to get through that layer.
Oh yeah, the layer itself is probably a medieval plough soil, so it's just a matter of how much damage there. I wouldn't have thought the medieval plough would have been able to get through stone walls. So from that point of view, things like floors and that, mosaics, it may have torn up. I mean, they're obviously relatively